My name is Sela Knox. I am 28 years old, and this story starts right in the thick of a backyard barbecue meltdown, where my older sister Tala hurled a full plate of brisket across the picnic table, the meat and sauce splattering everywhere as shouts erupted, and my parents just sat there, frozen, their faces a mix of denial and defeat. The air in our Austin backyard hung heavy with the smell of smoked mesquite and betrayal, all because I'd just shared news of my engagement to Levi without looping her in first, a choice that shattered the fragile peace we'd all pretended to maintain for years. It wasn't the surprise that ignited her, it was the realization that for once, I'd stepped out without her blueprint. And in that instant, the control she'd woven into every corner of my life unraveled in front of everyone. Before I dive deeper into how that afternoon exposed cracks I'd long ignored, drop a comment below with your go to Austin spot for live music and the time you're tuning in. Let's see if we're all chasing the same vibes while unpacking this family chaos. What unfolded after that barbecue didn't fade like a bad hangover. It lingered, sharpening into something sharper and more invasive, pulling threads from conversations I wasn't part of, and reshaping my choices through whispers that reached me secondhand. I held back at first, not from doubt, but from a calculated watchfulness mapping how Tala would stretch her reach while cloaking it in the guise of sisterly duty. That pause gave me space to trace the patterns back to their roots, to the way our family had always orbited her without question. Growing up in the humid sprawl of Austin, our home on the east side felt like any other sprawling ranch style setup with creaky porches and the distant hum of 6th Street traffic as backdrop. Tala, 5 years my senior, had claimed the spotlight early, her voice cutting through dinners with unsolicited advice on everything from my high school electives to the apartment I'd rented post college. She framed it as big sister wisdom, the kind born from her experience. But it always landed like a directive, especially since mom and dad leaned hard into harmony, smoothing edges with deflections rather than digs. They'd nod along to her, takes their silences, urging me to fold rather than fight. Because why rock the boat when Tala's certainty kept things afloat? Over time, I adapted, sharing just enough to sidestep scrutiny, convincing myself it was strategy, not surrender. Levi entered that quiet orbit 3 years ago, a graphic designer I'd met at a South Congress coffee shop. His easy laugh and unflinching questions about my day pulling me toward a steadiness I'd forgotten existed. He spotted the deferrals I made around calls from Tala, the way I'd edit stories to soften potential backlash, and gently nudged me to reclaim the air in my own sentences. As we talked rings and futures over late night tacos at Torchy's, I felt a protectiveness bloom, not exclusionary but essential, a shield against the dissection that awaited any milestone in our family script. That shield held until the 4th of July barbecue when the Texas sun beat down on our backyard like it had a grudge, grills firing up with ribs and sausage, while cousins and neighbors milled about under string lights strung between live oaks. I'd chosen that moment deliberately after months of private joy, with Levi wanting the announcement to land clean and collective free from preemptive edits or Tala's inevitable revisions. The crowd was modest, mom fussing over potato salad, dad flipping burgers with his usual detached focus, Tala holding court near the cooler with our Aunt Elise, a sharp tongued realtor who'd always echoed her niece's opinions like gospel. Levi stood beside me, his hand light on my back, as I raised my glass of Shinerbach and set it plain. Levi and I were engaged, set for a small ceremony next spring at a Barton Springs overlook. The initial ripple was polite. Mom's tight smile, Dad's grunted, "Congrats." Aunt Elise's arched brow before Tala's chair scraped back, her eyes narrowing like I'd confessed a crime. "You announced this without me, without running it by the one person who's always had your back." Her tone sliced through the sizzle of the grill heads turning as if on cue. I kept my footing, explaining we'd kept it close to savor it first, but she barreled on, voice climbing. Decisions like this aren't solo gigs, Sela. Not in this family. I should have vetted him, the plans, everything. The accusation hung laced with that possessive edge, turning what should have been cheers into uneasy shuffles. Aunt Elise chimed in, then her drawl thick with feigned concern. Honey, Tala's right. Surprises like this blindside folks who care most. Levi stayed silent, his grip steadying me, while Mom murmured something about cooling off over peach cobbler. But Tala wasn't done. She snatched her plate, the ceramic one with our childhood monograms, and flung it toward the grass brisket flying in arcs that dotted shirts and skirts alike. The crash echoed halting laughter cold, and in that suspended beat, I saw it clear. This wasn't hurt. It was her grip slipping, and she'd claw to hold on. The barbecue limped to an early close after that, guests slipping away with excuses about traffic on I-35, leaving sauce stains and stunned glances in their wake. Tala stormed inside without a word, Mom trailing with apologies that felt rote. Dad stacking chairs like the outburst was just another spill to mop. I lingered with Levi under the oaks, the cicadas ramping up their chorus as if to drown the residue, and for the first time I didn't rush to bridge the gap. Days blurred into a tense quiet broken only by Tala's Instagram story, a curated reel of old family pics overlaid with captions about loyalty tested by hidden paths and when trust crumbles under solo steps. No tags, no direct shots, but the subtext screamed my name, vague enough to rally sympathy without risking pushback. By evening, my phone lit up with DMs from mutual acquaintances, their words mirroring her script. Heard about the engagement drama, why keep Tala in the dark? That's cold. One came from our old neighbor Carla, a retired teacher who'd babysat us both. Her message laced with disappointment that echoed Tala's phrasing verbatim. Then Aunt Elise texted, forwarding a group chat snippet where Tala had vented about my ingratitude, pulling in half a dozen relatives who'd never questioned her before. I didn't fire back. Instead, I archived it, all timestamps and threads, building a quiet dossier. Levi reviewed it over dinner at our Zilker apartment, his brow furrowing not at the content, but the coordination. This isn't random venting, it's a playbook. He was spot on, the posts primed. The pump, private chats sealed the flow, turning my boundary into betrayal overnight. What stung deeper was how seamlessly it worked. Folks I'd shared laughs with at ACL now side-eyeing me in grocery lines, their concern a veil for judgment. I recognized the trap, responding would have fed the fire, validating her as the aggrieved center. So I leaned into observation, noting how Tala's narrative cast her as the steady guardian I'd forsaken, while I became the elusive flake-dodging family roots. As wedding talks surfaced in stolen moments, venue scouts at Ladybird Lake invitations sketched on napkins, Tala's intrusions ramped up, uninvited emails landing with suggestions for florists she'd vetted and officiants who aligned with our values. She bypassed me entirely, once booking a tasting at a hill country winery under my name, then acting baffled when the coordinator called to confirm. Just saving you time, sis, you know how scattered you get. She'd say, her laugh light, but the undercurrent ironclad. Levi fielded a call from her, too polite at first, until she pivoted to hypotheticals about what ifs. In our match, her tone dipping into compliments that felt too pointed. You're so grounded, Levi. Sela's lucky, though, sometimes she doesn't see it. I caught the shift when he showed me the follow-up text later that night, screen glowing in our dim kitchen. Ever wonder if she's settling? We could grab coffee talk real off the record. The words landed like a gut punch. Not flirtation exactly, but a wedge meant to pry, implying I was the weak link in my own story. Relief washed in when he confirmed he'd shut it down cold. No replies, but the violation lingered, threading back to those early patterns where Tala claimed veto power over my orbit. Aunt Elise amplified it unwittingly, or not dropping by unannounced, with tales of Tala's stress over my secrecy. Her realtor schmooze masking probes into our budget, as if ringside seats came with fiscal oversight. Then came the twist from my coworker Jax, a freelance videographer at the ad agency, where I handled client outreach. He'd overheard Tala name-dropping me in a networking happy hour at rainy street bars, spinning yarns about my impulsive phase to potential collaborators, enough to sour a lead I'd been nurturing for months. Jax pulled me aside the next day, his concern raw. "She's tanking your rep without saying it outright. Check your inboxes." Sure enough, two prospects had ghosted their last emails polite, but edged with doubt. That external ripple from someone outside the bloodline crystallized it. Tala's web wasn't contained to family. It snaked into my professional soil, testing how far she'd go to re-anchor me. Confronting Jax's intel meant no more passive cataloging. It demanded a pivot from endurance to exposure. Levi and I hashed it out over breakfast tacos at the truck near our office, the salsa's heat mirroring the burn of realization. This wasn't emotional residue. It was engineered erosion, and my quiet had morphed from armor to invitation. He urged clarity without chaos. Facts over fury, let them see the strings. I nodded the plan, solidifying around Tala's upcoming birthday dinner at Franklin Barbecue, a ritual she'd commandeered for years, the line out the door a badge of her planning prowess. Mom had already RSVP'd us her texts, laced with pleas for normalcy, while Dad's silence spoke volumes, his avoidance a family heirloom. Aunt Elise was coming too, her presence a wild card that could either buffer or backfire, and Jax, well, I'd looped him in as a quiet ally, his offer to document if needed, adding an unexpected layer of backup. The week leading up blurred with prep screenshots collated into a shared drive, timelines cross-checked my responses, scripted not for drama, but precision. I didn't rehearse accusations. I curated evidence from the winery overreach to the texts that twisted Levi's ear, each piece a pixel in the larger betrayal. Sleep evaded me those nights, the ceiling fan whirring like a metronome to doubts, would this fracture us beyond repair, or free the fractures already there? But morning light brought resolve. I'd spent decades calibrating to Tala's tempo, and this beat was mine to set. As we queued for the restaurant that evening, the August humidity clinging like regret, I felt the weight shift, not lighter yet, but purposeful, the dossier burning a hole in my pocket like a talisman against retreat. The line at Franklin snaked long under the metal roof, the air thick with hickory and anticipation. But inside the dining room buzzed with the clatter of trays and low hum of strangers bonding over beef. We'd snagged a corner booth after the wait, Tala at the head, like always, her laughter ringing as she recounted a recent closing on a Zilker condo, Mom beaming beside her dad nursing his tea with half-tuned nods. Aunt Elise arrived fashionably late, sliding in with tales of open houses that segued seamlessly into probing our big news, her eyes flicking to Tala for cues. Levi sat to my left, his knee brushing mine under the table, a silent anchor, while Jax hovered at the bar nearby, casual in jeans, but positioned for a quick pivot if things soured. Plates arrived heaped with fatty brisket and slaw, the ritual toasts flowing easy until the lull after first bites, when attention naturally drifted my way. I didn't stand or raise my voice. I just slid my phone across the butcher paper screen, unlocked the folder, and said evenly, "I've been quiet because I was gathering this messages bookings chats that turned my life into your script, Tala. Figured it was time everyone saw the full cut." The table stilled forks, pausing midair as Mom leaned in first. Her gasp soft but sharp at the winery confirmation email, time-stamped without my sign-off. Tala's fork clattered, her face flushing under the Edison bulbs. "This is private Sela, not some sideshow. You're twisting family worry into warfare." But I held steady, scrolling to the texts for Levi, the ones that dangled doubts like bait, then the happy hour recap Jax had forwarded, complete with attendee names, who'd since dodged my pitches. Aunt Elise snatched the phone next, her realtor poise cracking as she read aloud a snippet about my unreliable streak, her voice trailing into discomfort. Dad cleared his throat, eyes on his plate, but for once, He didn't redirect. This. This crosses lines. Tala. Jax materialized, then sliding into the empty seat with a nod, his presence a curveball that widened Tala's eyes, turning our intimate dinner into an unintended tribunal. She deflected hard, spinning context and overreactions. But the booth's energy had tilted. Questions rippled from Mom. Did you really contact those vendors? To Aunt Elise's hesitant, I shared that chat without thinking. Was it that bad? Levi added no fire, just a quiet. It was his words, landing like punctuation. The meal wrapped awkward checks divided in strained math, and as we filed out into the cooling dusk, Tala's glare promised fallout, but the dossier's glow lingered a beacon I'd finally ignited. In the days that trailed that dinner, the fallout didn't crash like waves, but seeped like groundwater shifting foundations I'd assumed solid. Tala's socials went dark for a beat, then resurfaced with subtler jabs reels on, boundaries gone wrong. But the traction faltered comments threading doubt instead of the usual affirmations. Aunt Elise called me the next afternoon, her voice stripped of alliance. Saw more after you left those texts to Levi uncalled for. I'm sorry, I amplified her side. Her apology cracked open a fissure, pulling Mom into a follow-up coffee at Joe's on 2nd Street, where admissions tumbled out over cortados. I've let her lead too long thinking it kept us whole, but seeing it laid bare, I missed how it dimmed you. Dad's reckoning came quieter, a voicemail string over the weekend, his gravelly tone admitting, avoided the hard talks to dodge the noise, but noise won anyway. Proud you spoke up. Jax's role amplified the ripple. His nudge led to an agency meeting where I addressed the soured leads, head-on transparency turning suspicion to solidarity, one client even looping back with renewed interest. Tala, though, doubled down in isolation voicemails, layering guilt with grievances, texts to Mom pleading, Sela's cutting me out over nothing. But the echo chamber shrank. Neighbors who'd messaged me post-barbecue now buffered her outreach. Carla even texting a quiet, talk to her, your side's got weight. The professional snag Jax uncovered deepened when I traced it further. Tala had name-dropped me to a shared contact at a rival firm, not just venting but angling to poach my network a move that backfired when the contact forwarded her email chain to me, laced with her casual dismissals of my solo stumbles. Armed with that, I looped HR subtly, not for malice, but documentation, and it prompted a gentle advisory to Tala's circle, nothing formal, but enough to chill her freelance encroachments. Levi and I pressed forward with plans, scouting rings at a Barton Creek jeweler, the process ours alone, untainted by oversight. Yet the emotional undercurrent tugged. Nights found me replaying the booth's tension, weighing if exposure healed or just highlighted the hollows. It did both, carving space for truths long buried, even as Tala's pleas escalated through proxies testing the boundary I'd etched. That testing peaked 2 weeks post-dinner when Tala orchestrated a family summit, via Mom's hosting, framing it as olive branch neutral ground at our old East Side home, complete with her signature migas and a mediator vibe she couldn't fake. I almost skipped the pull of old habits, whispering retreat, but Jax's text, "You've got backup, don't ghost your own power," and Levi's steady, "This ends on your terms," tipped me toward showing. The living room felt smaller than memory, sunlight slanting through blinds onto faded rugs, Mom hovering with iced tea pitchers, while Dad fiddled with the AC remote. Tala arrived last, composed in linen and resolve, Aunt Elise in tow, as reluctant witness her earlier apology, now a tentative bridge. We settled in mismatched chairs, the air conditioned but thick, and Tala opened with practiced poise. Sela, that dinner was a low. Let's reset. I'm here to listen, really. But her eyes darted to her phone, and within minutes the script flipped, defenses layered with, "You ambushed us," morphing into litanies of my patterns, the unconsulted moves, the ungrateful silences. Mom interjected softly, "We've talked. it's not all on her. But Talay steamrolled, pulling Aunt Elise into corroboration until the realtor demurred. Actually, after seeing those messages, the pivot came when I laid out the poached contacts forward timestamps aligning with her casual outreach, and Tala's facade splintered accusations flying. You're paranoid. Building cases like I'm the villain, Levi, who'd come as quiet support, spoke. Then his voice level. It's not paranoia when the evidence texts itself. Jax arrived midstream uninvited but timed bearing a USB of anonymized chat logs from the happy hour, his entry a jolt that had Tala sputtering. The summit dissolved not in screams but sighs. Mom's hand on my arm, a rare anchor, Dad muttering, enough, for the first time in years. Tala left in a huff, door slamming like punctuation, but the room's residue shifted alliances, realigning in whispers. Aunt Elise hugging me goodbye with a murmured, she's lost her way. You found yours. Driving home with Levi, the Colorado River glittering below Mopac, I felt the weight lift incrementally, not gone, but redistributed the summit's chaos, a final forge for resolve. Resolve hardened into rupture over the month that followed as Tala's tactics veered from pleas to pressure, enlisting Jax's rival firm contact in a misguided intervention email chain that backfired spectacularly when the recipient, a no-nonsense exec named Riley, replied all with pointed questions about professional boundaries. Riley's loop-in not only validated my concerns, but prompted a quiet industry heads-up, chilling Tala's networking swagger and costing her a key referral consequences she couldn't spin as victimhood. Mom called daily at first, her voicemails a mix of mediation bids and confessions. She cornered me today, demanding I sway you, but I see now it's her fear, not love, driving this. Dad's involvement grew too, a rare lunch at Kirby Lane, where he owned his complicity. Let her steer to keep peace, but it steered you wrong. Won't happen again. Aunt Elise distanced herself organically, her texts to Tala, going unanswered in favor of neutral check-ins with me, her realtor network unwittingly closing ranks against the drama. Jax's alliance deepened the professional safeguard. He co-pitched a project that landed me lead on a campaign for a local brewery, though in a tangible reclaiming of ground she'd tried to erode. Yet Tala persisted, a late-night voicemail layering sobs with ultimatums. Family doesn't block family. You're killing us. Until I drafted the message that sealed it. This isn't punishment, it's protection. No more access, no explanations. Heal your patterns without me in them. Hitting send felt like exhaling after a dive, the block following swift, her channels severed clean. Proxies trickled in Aunt Elise relaying, she's spiraling, blaming everyone. But I redirected gently, boundaries firm as Austin limestone. Levi and I leaned into the void, wedding plans, blooming unchecked vows scripted under live oaks, invites to Jax and Riley as nods to new roots. The quiet that settled wasn't empty. It echoed with reclaimed rhythm, decisions unvetted but vivid, my energy redirected from defense to design. That redirection revealed voids I'd filled with accommodation spaces now ripe for intention. Work at the agency surged, the brewery gig spawning collabs with food trucks along the warehouse district, my outreach turning heads that Tala's shadows had dimmed. Jax became more than ally, a sounding board over post-shift beers at Craft Pride, his stories of freelance hustles mirroring my pivot from deferral to drive. Mom and Dad orbited closer, their visits tentative but textured, Sunday suppers at our place, minus Tala's echo, where Dad shared war stories from his mechanic days, and Mom unpacked her own silenced ambitions, a high school art dream deferred for stability. Aunt Elise folded in too, her apologies evolving into invites to gallery nights downtown, her network, a bridge to prospects untainted by family fog. Levi's steadiness anchored it, all our evenings tracing futures over maps of hill country, escapes the engagement no longer a flashpoint, but foundation. Tala's fallout filtered through fragments, Mom mentioning a lost client, Aunt Elise, noting her withdrawn vibe at a neighborhood mixer. but I tune the static, focusing on the foreground, a promotion whisper at work, a solo hike at McKinney Falls, where clarity washed clearer than Ladybird's waters. Guilt flickered not for the cut, but the years lost calibrating, yet it faded against the freedom of unapologetic choices. Healing wasn't linear. It looped through doubts on drive home from Rainy Street shoots, but each loop tightened the core self-trust as compass, not crutch. Looking back from the vantage of months, the barbecue's crash feels like a catalyst cracked open. Not a scar, but a seam sealed stronger. Life post-cutoff arrived in Austin's incremental graces, mornings unhurried by obligation calls, weekends claimed for Barton Creek trails without narrative negotiations. The agency role expanded, Jax and I tag-teaming a series that snagged regional nods my name, standing solo in credits for the first time without caveat. Mom and Dad's presence refined holidays at neutral spots like the Continental Club, for blues sets their questions curious rather than corrective. Dad even admitting over brisket sliders. Miss the full table, but this feels right. Aunt Elise's orbit steadied too, her mentorship on client pitches a quiet repay for past echoes, while Riley's referral loop closed a circle with a partnership that buffered any lingering industry whispers. Tala's shadow receded to outlines a mutual friend's offhand. She's pivoted to solo flips, keeping low, implying deals soured by reputation's slow bleed. Her once bustling closings now sporadic, the poach attempt a pivot point that isolated her further. No grand downfall, but a logical unwind, networks contracting as trust thinned her pleas, unmet turning inward to patterns unchecked. Levi and I married under spring wildflowers, the ceremony intimate with Jack's toasting, and Mom's tear-streaked vows, Dad's grip firm in the exchange. The absence of blood-tied chaos amplified the vows' weight, commitment not to salvage, but to build boundaries as bricks in a life lattice work. I trace it now in quieter metrics, no braced explanations, milestones mine to mark energy poured into pursuits that pulse with purpose. The cut wasn't cruelty. It was curation, pruning what poison to let what nourishes thrive. That thriving underscores a truth forged in the fire: family isn't license for overreach blood. No blank check for boundaries breached. Control masquerading as care erodes more than it erects, and reclaiming your narrative demands not noise but nerve, the quiet courage to document, disclose, and detach when the weave turns toxic. I learned the hard way that peace isn't preserved by concession, but claimed through clarity, and walking from what's warped doesn't diminish you. It defines you. Don't let anyone, kin or otherwise, dictate your drafts. Guard your story like the rarest ink. Thanks for writing this out with me, from barbecue fallout to boundary bloom. Your listens make the shares less solitary. If this stirred echoes in your own lines, spill in the comments. What's one boundary you set that changed the script?